Good afternoon and welcome to this edition of Driven Women TV. I'm your host, Marie Younger Blackburn, visionary and event planner for Cape Cod's Conference for Women and event coordinator for Driven Women Serves. I'm here today with Sheila Lyons, and Sheila is a candidate for state senate here on Cape Cod and also a current county commissioner.
Yes.
And Mary Pat Flynn, who is also a county commissioner and a selectman in the town of Falmouth. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you for having us.
I'm glad to have you today. I commented to you that I'm a little nervous because you are some powerful women. You have been in service, in public service here on Cape Cod for many, many combined years, and you've done some amazing things. So I'm honored to be in your presence, and I hope that we can have a candid and fun discussion about what is happening in your lives today. So the purpose of Driven Women TV is to keep the message of Cape Cod's Conference for Women alive, and also to feature women in business and women who are of interest here on Cape Cod. So I wanted to ask you today, before we get started, what does it mean for you to be driven? What does that mean for you? Mary Pat, we can start with you.
I think, first of all, that it's very appropriate that you use the term driven, because I think anyone who runs for public office, but particularly women, have to be driven to that purpose and have to know what it's going to take for them, not only to win an election, but also to do the job. And for me, I was first elected back in 1993 as a selectman. And I was driven because I knew there were needs in the community that had not been met, but I also knew that there were people in the community who really wanted to work together to make it a better place for people to live, people enjoy, as the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce would say, to live and play and create and all of those good things. So, so that's what prompted me to run back in '93. And as you can tell, this is now, what, 2016, I'm still doing it.
Sure.
And in 2008, Sheila and I both ran for county commissioner, and there were 7 candidates, and we won. And we were the only 2 women in the race. And so we congratulated ourselves, believe me,
Sure.
because
So
we worked very
Sure.
hard to
win
that election in 2008.
Sure. So perseverance, that's what I hear. You just keep going. I think it's in our blood to be driven women. And Sheila, I heard it said of you that it's in your DNA, that your parents baptized you a Democrat, and just a lifelong public servant, I hear, in your story. So do you want to tell us what it means for you to be
you know,
driven?
I grew up in a great neighborhood when it was a great there was really, I came in sort of like at the transition of 50s into 60s. So I was a little bit younger than the women's movement, but older than the 50s generation. I was born after that. So I kind of, slid in there. And I had great parents. They were real working. They did not have the benefit of a formal education. My mother was an immigrant from England, Irish descent. My father was barely born in this country. So I'm second generation on my father's side, first generation on my mother's side. And when they were young, it was the Depression. And that was, my mother in particular, she had lost her parents. Both had died when they first came over here, and she was living with her grandmother. And the stories of, Christmas dinner with a can of Franco-American spaghetti, waiting for post-Santa. It was really severe back then, the shame and the anxiety of poverty. And that was never forgotten. But then they grew to be the greatest generation. They were the World War II heroes.
Sure.
And they saw, and my mother always said it was FDR that gave them back their dignity when he lifted them up. And it was then that we saw that being involved in politics, being involved in public life, and taking a part, whether you're running for office, but you have to participate in society and in the game of progress. if you're going to keep those opportunities for yourself and for others. And that since I was given these opportunities, I had that responsibility to give that opportunity, ensure that it was there for others as well. So that led me into social work. I also had, I grew up in a church, I was also baptized, Irish Catholic. And the church was much more tolerant then. I mean, or at least my experience was, it taught you that we were all God's children, that Catholic is universal. That's the definition of it. We're here, come the Catholics, here we all come, said James Joyce. And so I had a real liberal and tolerant view of the world given to me and it was reinforced. It was more of a social justice church, especially in my high school years. I sort of went to a very radical, progressive Catholic girls' high school, believe it or not. And it doesn't exist anymore because probably it was too radical. But it was really all about social justice. So that was inculcated from the beginning. And I was always proud to be in this country. I grew up in Boston. I knew the history of Boston very early. I just felt that we were the greatest city. It all began there.
Sure.
And I always worked for politicians, good politicians, I thought would keep that message alive, that we're here for the working man and the working woman and the families. And that's been lost. So I have fought very hard to get good people elected, many times disappointed, and of the outcome of either their performance or them not getting elected. And by happenstance, you get to a maturity where people say, why don't you go run for this? And you say, women need to feel that they're competent for the job of politics, that you actually can do it. And whereas a man will say, sure, I'll run for that. They don't really think, could I do this? I think women feel that you have to at least know what's going on, and you have the ability to make that difference and lead.
I think you really know what's going on, Mary Pat. You've been in public office for many years. You've been a selectman here in Falmouth for about 16 years, correct?
18.
18 years, and this will be your last term coming up. And we thank you for your service and all that you've done here in Falmouth, and in your running for re-election as a county commissioner. Can I just ask you why?
Why?
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the whys is I finally made the decision not to run for re-election as a selectman. In fact, tomorrow is my last day as a selectman. So I'm experiencing a little bit of separation anxiety in a sense, because it's been such a long time. But in terms of running for the county, I think over the last 8 years that Sheila and I have been commissioners, I think we have raised the level of awareness of county government. And I have this idea that there are things that government can do, which is really the whole purpose of government. It does things that people can't do for themselves. But when it comes to Massachusetts, that's hard to do because Massachusetts is home rule. So every town has its own set of rules, charters, whatever they may be, form of governance, and they're all different. And so how does one as a county in Massachusetts be able to provide services not only to the people but to the towns as well and make it work? And that's a real challenge for me. But I think that it benefits the citizens for us to keep working on that goal, is to find ways to help save money for the towns, which obviously has a positive effect on taxpayers, and try to provide services that are more efficient, that are meaningful, that actually do what they say they're going to do. And to me, that is just a great challenge. I love the whole idea is making it work. And that's been my whole goal all along, is making it work. Whether it's making a town work well or a county work well, how can we do that and how can we improve on it? So that's what drives me.
Awesome. And speaking of working well, you have been working together for the last 8 years, correct? And have there been times when you disagree? And how do you work out those times?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There have been times.
Yeah.
And how do you work that out?
Well, I think it's because we respect each other
Yes.
a great deal. And we learned, we didn't know each other really before we were both running. I mean, I knew.
We were acquaintances.
She was the woman from Wellfleet.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
yeah, and she was the woman from Falmouth.
But we knew each other from the Cape Cod Democratic Town Committee. But we didn't know each other that well. But we did get to know each other. And I think it's the fact that we know why we're here. We know why we're running. We share the same goals for the county, and we also respect each other.
Sure.
And I think that's what makes it work. And I think that's what's made it work for us, to be able to not to disagree sometimes, but to also make things happen and still be friends.
Sure. The definition of women. We can work together, correct?
Yes.
And
Yes.
we can get along and be collaborative.
Right.
So Sheila, you have a lot of experience. I read your bio. I've listened to tapes. I've known you. I think we ran into each other up at a Barack Obama
Yep.
Rally back
Right.
in the day, and we, share some fun memories of
Bonded
that.
there,
Yeah. So, but you have a lot of experience. You have experience with the environment, opioid addiction issues, housing issues, etc. Do you want to just expound on some of your areas?
Well, coming into the county, and Pat and I did face some obstacles. There had been a institution built. There was sort of institutional inertia. So there were many boards of county commissioners before us, and I think our county is relatively young. We're almost about 27 years old now. And in the beginning, I think it was a threat to the towns, another layer of government. It's going to be, taxing us, telling us what to do. Nobody really wanted it. But the preamble of the charter is to address the large issues that transcend the town boundaries and how to fix those issues. And those issues really are, the environment, wastewater. We have coastal erosion surrounding. We're a peninsula out in the ocean. We're surrounded by water more than any other place on the eastern seaboard. We are filled with water. We have a sole source aquifer that we depend upon for our survival. Our oceans are the attraction of many tourists. We're tourist-based. So that was a very big concern for me, because I started to see that was degrading rapidly once I became a full-time resident. When you're here in the summer, you're just enjoying this beautiful place. And then you also start to realize that there is a working class that is not able to achieve. They're being hit harder than even the people on the mainland. So we have a real tough time with a year-round economy. How do we sustain that? How do we build that? How do we give people the tools to be entrepreneurial here? Transportation is a very difficult issue. We have one main road that goes the entire Cape with these offshoots that are little side country roads, and we all know what it's like here in the summer with that. The environment, human services I'm a social worker, so I was very involved with that even on the assembly. The homeless issue, housing issues. We could have vouchers for people who are in need of housing, and we don't have the housing to give them. So these are all terrible, these are very serious challenges across the country, especially as the affluence has come into our economy, but only for a few. And that is really showing. And I look at the opioid addiction, sort of like where our state of our families are today. There's a lot of dysfunction.
Sure.
And I think that what we're looking at is the aftermath. This is the consequence of the draconian and very severe measures that we have been living under for 30 years, where, government is the problem. We keep hearing that. So people look at government as the problem, and actually forgetting that we are the government. We the people were the three words that our founding fathers put in there to show where the power lies. And we have forgotten that we actually have the power to say to people, this is what we want, and not in a Tea Party way, not exclusively for what we believe, but how are we going to benefit everyone? So that's why you really kind of have religion in politics. You can't have, real special interests, because we're pooling our money to reinvest in ourselves through taxes, and that is being obfuscated. The language has been changed purposely through focus groups, large money in advertising, power. So when I see that, I just say we are deteriorating as a people and not tolerating each other. And that is what sort of drives me, as well as I now have the skills and I think the mindset to actually make good policy and change for the better.
Sure. So it's really in you. You were born and bred into this.
I like people, and I don't like to
yeah.
see us like this.
Right,
I
right.
really do genuinely like people. I
Oh,
think
you
Pat
have to
feels
like
the same
people to do this.
And,
Sure.
and I believe that we're better than this.
Right.
And I'm very, it's sort of sorry to see us like this.
Which leads me to another point I think that has always been so important for me. If you really want to do the work of government and be able to make a difference, and you need to know what the needs are, and the only way you find that out is to go where the people are. They don't want to come to you. They want to talk to you on their turf,
Sure.
where they live, where they work. And oftentimes I will hear selectmen or other politicians say, well, we need to have an office, and we have to have office hours so people can come and see us. And I said, they won't come. You have to go where the people are.
Right.
And that's the way I think that you can have a much more effective government, is if you interact with people where they live, where they work, and really see for yourself what their concerns
And what
are.
does that look like for you, Mary Pat, going in and meeting with people where they live and then where they work?
Well, to me, it means there are so many events, at least here in Falmouth. You could go to 5 different things a day, whether it's going to the senior center, whether it's attending a concert, whether it's a lecture, whether it's going, like just recently we had a celebration for Michael Lopes, who's a very renowned basketball player. And he was here in town. He used to play for Falmouth High School. And so they were honoring him by hanging his old basketball shirt up in the gym. And so you go to an event like that, and you see it was at the Portuguese American Club, or the Cape Verdean Club, rather. So you get to meet the Cape Verdean people and interact with them. And I think that's how you become a good elected official, by going to different events and making yourself known and talking to people. It's an amazing, and if you have to really like people to do this.
So it's relational.
It's
all
absolutely,
relational.
it's
Yeah.
all relational.
I see you ladies out and about a lot over the years at many events, and I'm sure you'll continue. So Sheila, what do you see as your greatest challenge for this upcoming election?
As far as the campaigning of it, or
as far as the campaigning in this election, I know that you're going to be, if elected, the first woman state senator from Cape Cod. I want to know how important that is to you. Is there, being a woman, does that change things for you, or? I just want to.
I didn't really think of that when I went to run.
Sure.
I just thought that and there are good candidates in this, and one has dropped out. But I really had to think about it, because it's a contact sport, even and I don't want to throw the woman card, but the men have their card, so I will. But it is different for a woman. There's a different set of criteria that people judge you on. How do you look? How do you present yourself? Are you too aggressive? Are you shrill in your, if you speak too loudly? And it's very easy to put preconceived notions on people. And what I found is how many people make judgment calls on you and they've never met you. They'll say this or that, or and some of them are positive, some of them are negative. But I think what it is, it's just getting out there. I mean, to me, campaigning, money is always this, it's also an indicator to other people. How much money can you raise? Even on the state level, it's a viability test. I think we're making politics a business. And it's all about a game, and it's like a football game here, like which team is winning and all of that on superficial things. I think it's the hard work of getting out and meeting people and talking to them and listening to them.
Sure.
So even when you're doing that, one lesson that I've learned, the biggest lesson I've learned in being in public life, is I say I ran on wastewater. So to me it was very obvious, the environment is our economy. We are having our waters degraded rapidly. We're hitting a tipping point here. It's time we do something. We have to collectively come together and say, even though it's been going on for 50 years, we're the generation sitting here now, and we've got to address this. So in doing that, you think you can just go up there with these great ideas and say, okay, here we're going to fix it. And everyone's like, I don't think so.
Right.
No, that's too much money. We're not going to do that. And it really forces you to listen why and come back and really work on how are you going to get this done. And the success of the 208 exercise of updating the 208 regional water quality plan, which was a 2-year effort, and the state actually recognized that it was going to, if you're going to get 15 towns with all of those people to come together, you needed the resources of really doing that. And they did give us $3 million of the Cape Cod Commission. And we had focus groups, and we built them around watersheds, which took away town boundaries, and people could look at the problem with a little bit more objectivity and saying, here's what it is, and here's the tools that you said you wanted us to use. So let's use all of these tools and see how effective and how you can keep your costs down. So it helps it brings in the input of the public, and you're respecting their opinion. Not everybody's going to get what they want, but as long as you are benefiting the majority of people, that's about the best you can really ask for. So to me, you can go in with all the great ideas, but they're not going to happen unless you go out and you build those relationships, find out where the differences are, and try to bring people together on that. Social work has been a great background to be able to do that. Sure. And then the exercise of actually trying to do it in public has also been a very learning experience. So.
Just to comment on that, too, I think the 208 wastewater plan was the first truly regional effort by the Cape Cod government through the Cape Cod Commission to try to effect change, an important change on the Cape. And I remember having a conversation with Paul Nitzwicki early on, because I'm this big person. You've got to bring everybody into the room. If you want to get something done, people have to come and understand it and buy into it. And if they do, you can't mandate things like this. It doesn't work that way. Right. So Paul utilized the Consensus Building Institute out of Cambridge, as we did here in Falmouth with our wastewater plan. How do we engage as many people as possible who live here to participate? And they developed a plan to do that. And there were people from all the various towns working together. And some of them, sometimes I think, didn't realize that there were people from Orleans and people from Chatham and maybe somebody from Mashpee, and they were all sitting in the same group, learning the same issues and trying to apply the solutions to their own community. And then they had to go back because a lot of the watersheds are shared. They're not all part of just one town. So the towns have to work together in order to be able to solve the watershed issues, which is what this is all about with 208. So it was a really great experience in opening up the Cape to see itself as a much larger place than just each individual town. And I think that will help us a lot moving forward on regional issues because of that experience.
And it left respect for the town sovereignty. It wasn't taking anything away. It was you were a partner. And so everything on the county level is done with 15 towns. We have 15. We have a 15-member board of everything. Whether you're appointed or you're elected, or so we can't do anything. But from that experience, I think we all learned. I think we've all learned, and we've all become better. That was the beginning. That was a turning point for the county. And I have to, we have a great staff. We vote on it. We push it. I can be the lobbyist out there in the community, as Pat is the advocate. But we have a great staff that, we can't take all the credit, although we are able to just by elected office. But this is all a team effort, and people. We've been blessed with people who really care and want to make things better here. So all they needed were people like us that would believe in that and work with them to do that. And it's not, some people want to say they're rubber stamping, and they're not. We don't rubber stamp anything. There's a lot of hours I spend in rooms with my staff, with the public. What is the policy that we need? What are the obstacles in this legislation that we could ask to be changed that would be unique to this area, to this? And that is what I see. I think that we need a voice up there that understands that when we work regionally, we come out with a better result. And there's flexibility in that. And some legislation is mandated. And how are you in this little town going to meet that mandate by yourself? So if there's flexibility and the ability to regionalize with those mandates, I think the state would be better off. And those are some of the lessons I would like to bring to the state.
It's also created the opportunity for state and federal funding for the Cape. Just because we're working regionally, individual towns would have very difficult time getting certain state funds. But the fact that we're working together regionally as the Cape has opened the door to federal funds as well as state funds. So it's been...
and so it's a model that we can use across the board in other areas, the opioid addiction, housing, et cetera.
And that's really, that's when we convened the task force on substance abuse, that I went right with that model. Like, we have to bring everybody in the room. So we have the courts and the police and the hospital providers and the rehab providers and social workers and people in recovery and a representative from each town.
Right, right.
So we have about 35 people,
wow.
40 people there.
And even in the police department now, I talk to the chief occasionally as a selectman, and I know that the town collaboration, like Mashpee Falmouth, Bourne, Mashpee Falmouth, work together and support each other, particularly in the opioid issue. It can't just be each town trying to do it by themselves.
Exactly.
So the issues we have today have more commonality to them than they have individual town issues. And so towns are working together, and it's really nice to see that happen. And of course, all the town managers from all the towns on the Cape meet together every month too. And that helps with the collaboration. So there have been a lot of doors that have been opened in the last few years.
There's been a lot of criticism because there was an internal inertia, and it was very hard to break that. I mean, you could say, well, you're the executives, you should go in. But if you're asking your staff for certain information, they only give you so much. What are you going to do? You can't go in and say, you know, I think you're not. You have nowhere to go on that other than just making a lot of noise. So we've been, and I know I've been just very. I worked very hard in the work I could accomplish, and that was through my committee work in all of these different areas. And we've shared these hats over years, and on some I've kept solely to my. I was the commissioner that kept doing it because it was my kind of passion, and they all voted to allow me to follow my passion. So. Awesome. Which was nice about the board. So
this is your second run for state senate, right?
Yes, actually it is.
Yes.
Yeah, I went down this road once before.
Right, and now you've accomplished a lot since then. You've gained a lot more knowledge in the area of education as well, and you're ready. Just tell us what happened in that time between your last run and now.
Well, when that seat opened up, I had just become county commissioner, and it was sort of like, wow, she just, I was sort of this unknown, and I really ran this race, a 15-town race, and it was pretty exhausting, and it was a close race. So I was on the job for 2 years, and I was learning, and that seat opened up, and nobody was going into it. Nobody was running, and I'm like, we got to get a Democrat in there, and we have to, So I had my partisan hat on as well. And so I put my name in, not really feeling like I really did know what I was doing. Looking back, I wasn't as confident as I am now. And people did say, you need a little bit more experience. And they were right. It does make a difference working in government, in a legislative or an executive, in a policy making, real policy making where we're making the calls. And having to have those lessons of, my idea is a great idea, but it's going nowhere. So everybody makes you really work. And I think the harder you work, you do come out with a better, you have to respect the opinion of the people you're representing. You can't just feel like you know what's best. Sure. And I see that happening on boards. There's a lot of backroom stuff, and everybody comes out on the camera and like, oh, we all sing Kumbaya, but there's all this, and I can see you can't manipulate anything. You're better to take, it's not going to happen now. It will happen down the road if we work hard at it and not let it go. So it's really focus and the hard work that gets things done and gets people to respect the fact that you're involving them. You just come out with better stuff. But with this race, I have the experience, I have the passion, I have the energy and commitment, and yet, so this is a weird political year. Sometimes this experience doesn't matter. And it's not like I have Hill experience. I'm not part of that system.
Right.
So it is an interesting thing. There's I have two young men that are challenging me, both very passionate. I hope they stay in politics, but I hope they don't start their beginnings here. So
Right.
that's my goal.
Yeah, you have to have a lot of passion to do this job.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a will to just get in there and fight the good fight.
Right.
Yeah.
And at this point, I have fought that fight. And it would be a shame to waste that experience where I really feel I could be effective. So that's what really motivated me to do. But as far as driven, I think women are driven instinctively. You're driven to make sure your family is provided for. You know, we have our men, and they are also out there, you know, traditionally have always been, but the women are in my experience, it's always been the women that were pushing a little bit more. We got to get this, got to get the kids this, we have to get that.
Sure.
And they would, you know, work sudden, you know, whatever they can, whatever, to make it work.
I have 4 sisters, and you can go all around the country, and they're doing similar things around the country,
Right.
moving their families, education, their
Right.
jobs, and also working in the community. I sent my mother a text the other morning, and I said, Mom, change the world. Just simply, I said that. And she said, okay. It's in our DNA. She's retired now, and she's had a career, and our doors in my home were always open for community meetings. I don't know if we see that as much anymore, where our parents, like you said,
Right.
your parents, just kind of raised you in that, knowing it's part of you. And our doors were open for change.
Yeah.
If there was an issue in the community, my parents would hold, you know, public meetings. The politicians would be in our home, and it would begin there, that grassroots, where people in the community, they weren't complacent. They were active in marching and speaking out and being that change. And I think, like you said, we don't want to see that die.
No, we
don't want
don't.
to see that
No.
die.
In families, you know, there's all different families now, and there's single parent families, and that parent is working day in and day out. They can hardly, if they know what it says on the headline of the newspaper, they're lucky. So you need the tools to be able to teach your children, and a lot of that is being lost, and then it's frustration and dysfunction, and then you're up against the economy of the day. You're struggling, you're not going anywhere. That just leads to a hopelessness, which I did not grow up with.
Right.
We didn't have much, but we knew we could get there. And I don't think that people feel that today.
But how do we change that? How do we bring that back into the home and into the family? Because there is a complacency. We hear everything in sound bites now.
Exactly.
We have, you know, Twitter tweets,
Right.
LinkedIn, Periscope, everything. So everything's in a sound bite. Everything is sensationalized. I think we had more. I think Donald Trump got more press this weekend than anyone I've ever seen. And that's good for him. They say, you know, any press is good press or whatever. So they're just talking and talking. But real information, real people really understanding the issues. How do we get there? How do we get back there?
Well, you know, I was very young in the Kennedy era, Jack Kennedy era, and when he became president. And he made a statement that he said, every person can make a difference, and every person should try. So I have that picture of him with that quotation hanging on my wall. And I think that what we need to do is to kind of stoke those feelings in other people, especially younger people, that you can make a difference.
Sure.
That, because some people think, oh, it won't matter if I'm there or not. Nobody will notice. Nobody will care that I you know, left
My
or
one
didn't
vote doesn't
stay
count.
with the committee or whatever. But it does make a difference, and you can make that difference. So I think the thing is to if people don't understand it, to help them understand how they can make that happen. No, I look at it, and I'm not there totally to get recognition for anything, but I know that what I am doing is making a difference. And that's a goal that's important to me, because hopefully my idea or my feeling is to, and my goal is to make it a better place for people to live.
And they say that a woman's greatest accomplishment is to be a mother, and not all of us are mothers, but I think to go even further, the greatest accomplishment of a woman is to raise a child who grows up to be a change maker in their own community, or have a heart for doing that little something in their own community. Like your daughter, Sheila, I was listening to some tape, and your daughter, Sarah, introduced you, and she was talking about how from a young age you instilled that passion for politics in her.
Right.
And on her birthday, you would say, here's your cake now, you know, on her 18th birthday. Now let's go down and register to vote. But all your conversations led to some kind of passionate feeling about something in the community, whether it be education or housing or whatever. And I think that's basically where we begin, by instilling it in our own children.
Yes.
And I teach my children to go out there and do something, be a change maker.
Yeah, today kids have a lot. They have a lot given to them. We love them to almost like, you know, there's no wrong they could do. And we all know about helicopter parents and, you know, following them all through graduate school, talking to their teachers. I mean, there are those stories. And I deliberately tried to give her that independence. I certainly was there. Believe me, I was a hands-on mom. And I did drag her to more political things than she ever wanted to go to. And that's what she was saying in retrospect. It was kind of torturous then, but she sees the benefit of it today. I think with all the technologies, we're becoming disengaged. All of those community things that kept us, even church. I mean, church was an identity and it was a community. All of those things are not as concrete as they were. So that's what's scary to people. It's a changing world, so it brings out the worst in us when you're afraid, you become prejudiced, or you think it's the other. And we also have like you say, all this tweeter and twit. You can kill somebody. You can destroy a person's life with one, you know, they say one word wrong, and all of a sudden, like, oh, you know, they're this and they're, and that wasn't the way, you know, everybody, we're all flawed in one way or another. Nobody is perfect here, and we're just all trying to struggle and get through. And I think we forget that we're connected. And that is what we have to try to bring back. And I think politics, if you do the work and work with your constituents, not just get voted and then say, this is what I voted for and I'm wonderful. You have to go and engage and say, these are the votes that are coming up with me. This is how I'm going to vote, and you know, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. And because everything is complex, nothing is as easy. There's not a simple answer. There's always going to be somebody who won't be unhappy, or so you have to try to make sure that you're doing something with as little unintended consequence that's a detriment as possible.
Do no harm. Huh?
Do no harm.
Right.
That's right. Tread careful and do no harm.
Someone, a couple weeks ago, on one of the networks, they were talking about Bernie Sanders' campaign, and they were thinking that, or they were saying that if Bernie Sanders didn't win the election, what's going to happen to all those young people that came out in support of him? And so there were a group of us talking about that. What are we going to do? And are we just going to let them go off and forget that they were ever engaged like that politically or for their country? And so we thought we should encourage them to get engaged in their communities in some way. And then when they do, support them, vote for them, encourage them, bring them in. Like we have a couple of young people here in Falmouth that are running for state office, which I think is great, in their 20s. And we should support them and help them get elected.
Well, that's sort of the mentality that's supporting my opponent.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, but I do feel that the state senate, I mean, if this was a rep race, I probably would say go forth, because you got the energy and the passion for that. So I do look at my seat as a little different. The state senate is a, would you say, a little more
gravitas.
Gravitas, a little more maturity.
More honored institution.
Yeah, you should have a little bit more life experience about the
but
human
I don't think
condition.
what Mary Pat
No,
is
what
saying.
you're saying.
I agree.
Just generally, speaking generally.
When we say support, just like when we encourage women to join races,
Exactly.
we would love to also support them as we, as all things being equal, of course, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's the sentiment that you were given, to continue to encourage those young people who are now engaged.
Yeah, and
you know,
who show
have
an
been
interest
engaged.
is to.
And as my opponents, I do want to encourage them as well. I just, right now we're opposing each other.
Sure.
But if I could just add on what she was saying about Bernie Sanders, I saw an interview. He said, "I'm afraid if I even get in, I will be disappointed because not everything is going to turn out the way I'm saying." And what my purpose is to say that the revolution, this political awakening that he is trying to bring back, he goes, "I'm trying to have people remember how government can work." That is my goal.
Sure.
I feel like a bridge between a Bernie Sanders age and that younger age that doesn't really remember, because they're coming in not knowing that the tools of government are there to make this easy. This is not a broken system. We're just not using it, or we have been lulled into a place that we don't have the power. And that's what he is trying to say. And I want to be part of that revolution. I've been fighting for this to turn around. So I feel very ready to be that bridge between those and make sure that we remember that and pass it on to that those active children, those active youth. So I do want them to be engaged and not be disappointed because their man didn't or their woman did not get elected, but it really is the power of them and to stay at it and to keep engaged. And if you're going to make change, sometimes it's 10 years. If you look at the gay movement, that was a 20-year run of it first being pursued and it actually coming into. So legislation, you can put it up there a million times. If you walk away and say, "Well, I tried." No, you got to go back and say, what do we have to do now, and engage people and say, "I'm really a human being who happens to be this. Don't look at me as that first."
And I just keep hearing, I had a conversation with Governor Patrick, very, very brief, but I told him that I was afraid. I was bringing Cape Cod's conference for women to Cape Cod, and I said, I'm female, I'm black, and I'm a woman, and I'm afraid. And he says, "Good." He says, "Use your fear, let it drive you, and do the work." And that's what I hear from my father all the time, and it's do the work. So what I was hearing when I'm listening to you women, the work, running a campaign is hard work.
Yeah.
It comes with a lot of challenges, opposition, and either you could look to the left and look to the right at what someone else is doing, or you could do the work and I think that's the game of politics too. And you'll always have to continue to do the work once you get elected. It's even more work at that time.
It's a whole different experience.
Keep that seat, right? To keep that seat, to carry those mandates of the people and bring them forward. So I just wanted to add that, just that it's do the work. And I applaud you, women, you two women candidates, for stepping into the race, because it does take courage, it takes perseverance, it takes drive, and you two have it, and I applaud you.
Well, I applaud you because of all of, you just named your own obstacles. You're black, you're a woman, you live in a very dominant, minority is a very small population here on Cape Cod, let's face it. And so you experience much of what we experience, and you have pursued it. You walk in there with a smile, and over time, people forget that you don't see this exterior anymore. Wow, there's Marie, and people then start to look at you as a person, as opposed to all of those other things. And I think that your parents did well.
They did. They did do well. They gave me confidence and some knowledge, and
you care about others.
I do, and that's the crux of what we all do.
Right.
We care enough to say you want a seat at the table, to bring the ideas and information to other people, and to enact some change in your own community.
Right.
Yeah. So I applaud you, and I wish you both the best of luck in everything.
Thank you.
As you pursue these races. And I know you have a little bit of time before the primary is when?
The primary is September 8th, and the thing for people to remember is that it's going to be on a Thursday this day.
Okay.
So it really is, and there's not a lot of up races. So if you care about who's going to be your representative in the Falmouth and Barnstable area, if you care about who's going to be your state senator, if you care about different the referendums will be in the general. But or if you care about who's going to be county commissioner, and you should, because it's a local race, but it has a big impact on your life.
Sure.
It's going to be Thursday. Our elections are traditionally Tuesday, but because of Labor Day and the Jewish holidays being sandwiched in close quickly, they had to put it on a Thursday. So that's very important. And there was something you just said that I wanted to add on that was being a woman. I just want to say, since we're women here, we're talking about driven women. I never really thought about being a woman because I think we're strong women. We came from strong women, so you just kind of went in and you worked well with men, and it wasn't a male-female thing. But one thing that impressed me, I did go to a conference, and it was an amazing forum of Elizabeth Warren, Susan Collins, Mikulski, Barbara, who was once Barbara Mikulski, who's the woman lion of the House. And a woman from Arkansas and the senator, and their names are escaping me. One is Lincoln from Arkansas and the other one from Hawaii. But they all said, it's not that men don't like women or don't care. They just don't think about the issues unless you're sitting at the table. And they said, we've saved more women who were suffering from breast cancer or potential breast cancer because we got the legislation in and the funding and the research, whereas it wouldn't have been done. Daycare, school choice, all of these things would never even be considered if women weren't at the table. And that made me really understand that there is a difference in our mindset a little bit on how we approach issues, and that we do have to have that seat and that voice. So it's important to elect women and to have good women.
That being said, we thank you, ladies, for coming on Driven Women TV
My pleasure
today.
to be here.
The time went by really quickly.
It did.
Yes, and
we'll come back for an hour next time.
Please. Yeah. And we encourage all of you that are watching to keep a close eye on these races and do what you can to further these races. If you can help in any way, I'm sure they would appreciate the help. Please vote. We have an election coming up here on Tuesday, right here in Falmouth, May 2nd, for selectmen. Please get out and vote. And we thank you for your service, Mary Pat, in Falmouth. You've been here and serving just tirelessly for so many years. And we thank you and look forward to your election for County Commissioner. And Sheila, I wish you all the best in your race for State Senate, and thank you.
And I want to thank Pat. She's been a great mentor and a great friend over these 8 years. No, really, we've grown close.
We have a great relationship.
And she's been a good role model. So I appreciate all of her help and friendship.
Perfect.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.